Welcome to our satellite workshop on snow and ice control. This program is being broadcast from studios on the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis campus. I'm Tom Donahue, Program Coordinator for the Minnesota Technology Transfer Program at the Center for Transportation Studies here at the university. I'll be your host and moderator for today's broadcast. Back when this program was originally conceived, the idea was to broadcast to Minnesota locations only in order to test satellite technology within the state as a means of conducting training and implementing research. The Local Road Research Board provided funding as part of a pilot program on new communication technologies. However, as the program was being developed, the planning group felt we should make the broadcast available to other states in hopes of opening up the lines of communication and encouraging the sharing of practices, procedures, and technologies. And that is a central theme that you'll see throughout the program, the sharing of information, not only within Minnesota, but with other states and countries. I'm sure you'll find that many of the practices shown today are not only not unique to Minnesota, but may have been stolen from other states or countries. And that's the nice part about working in technology transfer in the government sector. Stealing of state secrets is not only permitted, it's encouraged. For those in Alaska, I know it's early, but I hope that your coffee is strong and our program interesting. Now about today's program. The backbone of this broadcast is the recently completed Snow and Ice Control, a Best Practices Review. Conducted by the Office of the Legislative Auditor, it contains 12 recommended actions for snow and ice control. The first part of the program covers written snow policies, performance measurement, plan preparation, public communication, and cooperative services. The second part of the program covers materials, equipment improvements, and preventive maintenance. Finally, we'll take you on a fast-paced and informative trip to see innovative snow and ice control practices around the nation and the world. A complete agenda is in your packet. We'll have a few short breaks during the day and a short lunch break at 11:48. Throughout the day, you'll see videos shot in the field to illustrate some of the 12 actions, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of our speakers at 2 different panel discussions, one after the administrative section and one after the operations section. Questions may be called or faxed in at any time using the numbers you see on your screen. That phone number again is 1-800-828-8554, and the fax number is 1-612-624-6079. Operators are standing by to take your calls. Your questions will be routed to the speakers during the panel discussions. Again, call your questions in at any time and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can during the panel discussions. Let's review some of the things in your packet. Those of you in Minnesota should have a complete copy of the aforementioned Best Practices Review. Those in other states should have the executive summary of the report. If you would like a complete copy, please contact the Minnesota Office of the Legislative Auditor. The address and telephone number are shown on your screen and contained in the executive summary and the full report. If you have access to the internet, you can also order it that way. Either way, it's free. In addition, all of you should have the agenda for today's program and an evaluation form. I would encourage you to keep the evaluation form handy during the program so you can rate us as we go. Please turn in the evaluation form to your site coordinator before you leave. We are very interested in hearing your comments. They are important to us. Now, let's get to our program. But before we do, let me say one thing. As you've already seen, I'm not Dan Rather, and this is not Connie Chung, and we're not in Hollywood. So please excuse our lack of polish. After all, our message is the important thing. The first segment of the program will introduce you to Snow and Ice Control, a Best Practices Review, explain how the review was accomplished, and let you know how it is being accepted. To help us do that, we have Jody Hauer with the Program Evaluation Division of the Office of the Legislative Auditor, and Tom Struve, Street Maintenance Supervisor with the City of Eagan. Let's start with Jody. Jody, I understand it was your job to supervise this Best Practices report.
That's right, along with the help of 2 of my colleagues from the Legislative Auditor's Office.
Before we get into the specifics of the review, could you tell us a little bit about what is exactly a best practices report and what is it all about?
Sure. It's a fairly new program. The legislature created the Best Practices Review program a year ago in 1994, so it's rather new. This particular Best Practice Review is a collection of information about how counties, cities, and townships around the state of Minnesota provide effective and efficient snow and ice control. It's really a good example of technology transfer because it provides to local governments new ideas, innovative ideas, and also promotes the exchange of information among local governments around the state. Information about effective practices, cost-saving, time-saving methods. When we begin a best practice review, we have three goals in mind. The first one is to collect a lot of information about what the best practices are around the state of Minnesota. The second goal is to, once we've got that information, find out which of those practices are transferable. Now this is rather important because, as you all know, a practice that works well in one area isn't necessarily suited to work in another. For instance, something that works very well in a city, on a city street where there might be high levels of average daily traffic, is not necessarily appropriate for long stretches of uninterrupted county or township roads that carry much lower levels of average daily traffic. So it's important for us to find out what information is transferable to other local jurisdictions. Then our third goal is to determine how we can present that information and get it out to local governments so that they can use it. It really is important for us to have some useful, practical information that local governments can use to benefit and improve their own program. And of course, that's one of the reasons that we're here today.
Well, how did this particular review come about and why did you choose snow and ice control?
Snow and ice control was the first topic chosen for the Best Practices Review program. An advisory council was established at the same time that the legislature created the Best Practices Review program. This advisory council has 8 members. They are all either city administrators or county administrators from both the metropolitan and non-metropolitan parts of Minnesota. And this group is the one that decided that snow and ice control would make a very good topic for the first Best Practices Review. They decided that for a number of reasons. First of all, it is probably one of the most visible public services that are provided around the state. It's essential, of course, in Minnesota, as it is in many other northern states and other states with mountain regions, that we have effective snow and ice control for travel during those snowy periods. It's key to adequate transportation for both people and freight around the state. Secondly, almost every local government in Minnesota, counties, cities, and townships, are involved to some degree in snow and ice control because they have roads under their jurisdiction. In Minnesota, each local government has the responsibility to maintain its own roads. So we have several thousand local governments out there who have some responsibility for snow and ice control. Furthermore, it seemed pretty clear that snow plowing practices tended to vary from city to city, county to county, township to township. Because of that variation, each agency would develop its own plan, its own strategies for effective snow and ice control. Because of that, there seemed to be a real high potential for the possibility of exchanging good ideas and new information from one local unit of government to another. So for these three reasons, it's a very important local service. Many local governments are involved in it. And third, it seemed to hold such high potential for a good exchange of new ideas. Snow and ice control became the first topic of a best practices review.
Well, it certainly seems to make sense for Minnesota. I do have to ask the obvious question. What does an auditor know about snow and ice control?
Well, of course, very little, actually, at least when we started the review. But what we did know was that we should ask the right people the right questions. And so that's exactly what we did. We relied very heavily on the input and knowledge and experience of the maintenance professionals that are out there around the state of Minnesota. And we did that in a variety of ways. Now, our job was finding out from the maintenance professionals what are the practices out there that are best. And then we would summarize that information and present it in a way that could be shared widely among local units of government. But to do that, we needed to rely on the expertise of those folks in the field who do this every day as a part of their living. So we involved the maintenance professionals in a variety of ways. We started out our project by inviting 30 to 35 maintenance personnel from different parts of the state to sit down with us for what we called a roundtable discussion. In this discussion, we wanted to have these professionals, which included everybody from county engineers to street superintendents and some equipment operators. We wanted that group to sit down and talk with us about what were the major issues in snow and ice control in Minnesota. And this group talked about everything, having a written snow policy, equipment maintenance, equipment costs, the concern about liability issues, the need for the importance of planning and the importance of good communication, and the difference in level of service from one area to another within the state. So with this good discussion, we were really starting off on the right foot in defining what the issues were in snow and ice control. We also held a series of small group meetings, focus groups, in 6 different locations around Minnesota. Some of these groups were of street superintendents and operators. Others of these were of public works engineers and directors. And we used these focus groups to help us define what best practices really are in snow and ice control. We also asked them to help us identify some cities and counties that they thought would be good sources of information about innovative and effective practices that are already out there. We also surveyed about 520 Minnesota local governments around the state and had a good representative sample from each region around Minnesota. Then after collecting all this information, we visited about 36 counties, cities, and townships, again in different regions of the state of Minnesota. We spent several hours at each of these sites talking to the maintenance personnel in depth about how they provide their service, what problems they might have encountered, whether the services that, or the methods that they're using are ones that could be used elsewhere, and if not, why not? So we spent quite a bit of time talking with them at their site around the state. The information from those visits probably contributed the most to this final product, this best practice review, and it does make up the bulk of what's in the final review. I think that is probably what readers are going to find most interesting and probably most helpful, because that's where we describe real examples of the best practices in action. And we also provide the names and phone numbers of contact people that the reader could call if the reader needs additional information. We were also very fortunate to have the help of a technical panel throughout the full process of the best practices review. This technical panel consisted of public works directors and street superintendents from both metropolitan and non-metropolitan Minnesota. This panel had met with us for 3 or 4 times during the months that we were involved in the review, offering us their technical guidance and their expertise. As we had questions or problems, they would offer feedback to us so that we made sure we were covering all the bases we needed to in this review. Plus, the members reviewed a draft of the report before we finalized it, and we incorporated their comments and suggestions into the final review. They were just invaluable to us, and I'm ever grateful for their help, because we wouldn't have been able to do it without this technical panel. And then finally, we enlisted the help of a consultant who came to us with a background in snow and ice control at the city level. He was able to help us make sure we were asking the right questions, and he helped us understand what the differences were among the different practices, what were the strengths and the weaknesses of the various snow and ice control practices that we looked at. So really, with all that help, how could we go wrong?
Well, thanks, Jody. I've really been impressed with all the work your office has done with this report. It's a great attribute to the state of Minnesota. It's logically organized, easy to read, and chock full of great information. Really a good job. Thank you.
Tom.
Okay, now to get another view of this report and to find out some more about it, let's turn to Tom Struve. Tom, in addition to your duties as street superintendent for the city of Eagan, you're also, I know, very heavily involved with education and training for both the Minnesota Street Superintendents Association and the Minnesota Public Works Association. What are the members of both those two organizations saying about this report?
Well, by and large, Tom, I think it's been very well accepted. From the beginning, and thinking about what Jody was saying there, I was in on a few of those initial meetings. Agencies at the local levels, meaning townships, cities, counties, and the state of Minnesota, all had a lot of input into the design and the outcome of the report. It makes me think about the initial meeting. There was kind of 2 big, serious bones of contention right from the get-go. I think the word best was a real hard word for everybody to deal with. the perception in the public or out in that group was that if we're looking at best practices, that anything that doesn't come out to be included in the report is not going to be an acceptable practice, or somebody could use it in the way of a club over the head or something like that. The other thing that I think people were very, very concerned about, and you remember that, Jody, was that especially maybe in government reports and compilation of statistical data sometimes has a way that the end result ends up to be apples and bananas instead of apples and apples, as it were. That's happened to people in the past, and people were very concerned that the reporting data, the process for gathering your data that you included in the report in a published document, that you be sure to understand that there's so many different configurations and different circumstances in different local agencies that it had to come out so that it didn't make somebody look like they were doing really poorly as a result of the analysis. It really did just didn't happen. The report is it's very comprehensive, it's well organized, it's filled with excellent information. I believe the really most important aspect is that it's the true beginning of the concept of technology exchange. As recently as last month, a group of state maintenance superintendents and our Minnesota Street Superintendents group began discussing working together in the area of combined training and workshops. I believe the process of meeting together during the development of the best practices review of snow and ice control has enlightened many of our agencies to the idea of exploring cross-communication, more combined training, and continuing and increasing partnerships. It's really opened our eyes to the ideas that at each of our levels of government, each agency has resources that the other agencies can use. As a person studies the information contained in the report, I think all of us will find examples of agencies using best practices in snow and ice control that we're also using at our own city or county or at the state level. The people, Jody, and your troops, the people who put the report together obviously couldn't visit every agency. They chose examples of practices which were parts of operations that they visited, at sites that they visited, and they supplied names and phone numbers of contact persons. I think this is really important. This is where the technology exchange begins, the names and the phone numbers. So this report, I think, stands as an excellent model for where we're all heading today in public works. There's more and more communication and working together at every level between agencies.
Thanks, Tom. I think you brought up a good point there about the names and the phone numbers. And just to reiterate the fact for those of you that don't have the full report, that Jody will be glad to supply you with as many copies as you like of the report, and all you need to do is contact those numbers that we gave you earlier. So again, and it's free of charge. Now, Tom's going to take us through the 12 actions, and it's contained in this executive summary, and I think that's probably the best way for you to follow along with what Tom's going to talk about next. And for those of you that have the full report, that executive summary is the first part of the report. But the executive summary, a couple of pages into the executive summary, you'll find a little shaded box that's called Actions for Effective Snow and Ice Control. And if you kind of keep it open to that particular page in either the executive summary or the full report, I think it'll make it easier for you to follow along with Tom's next talk. And he's going to show a couple of examples here that he's brought along. They're not all the same examples as we've got in the executive summary, but I think you'll get the idea. So Tom, take it away.
The report, Tom, is broken down between two primary categories: administration and management, and the operations segment. Under the administration and management group, the report covers adopting written snow policies as the first category. A good example is a written policy that's been in place for 25 years at the city of Mankato, Minnesota. They believe that an advantage of a written policy is that it facilitates citizens' understanding of what the services are that the city provides, as well as, and I think this is kind of unique, an awareness of citizens' responsibilities. I think oftentimes we forget the fact that we're kind of in this together, and there might be a little bit of responsibility involved with our constituents. And one of the advantages of a written policy is that you can point that out to them. The second category is cooperative services and facilities. The report highlights Douglas County, Minnesota, among many others. We'll hear more about cooperative facilities from Jan Eckern later in our broadcast on this presentation. At Douglas County, they store salt and sand for 9 other local governments. We all know that bulk purchasing benefits costs, and of course one central site has all the potential to benefit the environment. The best practices report then discusses contractual services. One of the highlighted examples is the city of Paynesville, Minnesota, with 34 lane miles of streets. They've been successfully contracting city snowplowing for years and handle sanding and snowblowing of sidewalks only with the city forces. The next category is measuring performance and maintaining records. Later in our teleconference today, we'll touch on this in more detail. Other examples in the report are Hennepin County's computerized records, which help analyze particular snow and ice control practices and procedures. The city of New Hope, Minnesota has developed a customer service contact system to track input from citizens, and this is also in the report. The last area covered under administration and management is equipment replacement plans. There are two very innovative capital replacement programs, and they're discussed in the report. The best practices snow and ice control review then moves on to the hands-on areas under the heading of operations, the primary heading. The first category is fostering a quality workforce. Several excellent examples of the strategic use of labor, operator training and recognition, and equipment enhancement and employee safety and comfort are included. The shots you see on your screen right now are a shot of a backlit, The shots you see on your screen right now are a shot of the city of Woodbury. They have a fall operators training day each year. And they go completely through everybody's route. They take however much time it takes to sort of restore the newest improvements to the infrastructure, get everybody up to speed on it, and it's just another opportunity to train our people. They do a really nice job with it. Next, under the subheading of preparation of plans, scheduling and weather forecasting, Ramsey County, Minnesota is one of the agencies highlighted discussing different options for sanding and plowing and different responses for each condition. In the book it actually shows they have different categories. There's like a code red, a code blue, a code yellow, different colored categories for all the different scenarios that we can get into: freezing rain, snow and rain, blowing snow, and so on and so on. It's very innovative. Other innovations include examples of on-call response teams, night scheduling, use of weather services, and road weather temperature sensors. I think that as snow and ice control becomes more of a proactive operation in the future, and we move in the direction of anti-icing and measuring friction, the use and application of road weather sensors is becoming more of a serious consideration at the local level. I know we're investigating and making plans and budgeting and so on to get into this technology. The next category under operations deals with selecting, storing, and applying materials appropriately. On your monitor, you should see a shot of Bloomington, Minnesota. They have what they call a screener shredder. I believe 3 years ago they purchased a piece, and they've been successfully washing and recycling winter sand for the 3 years with excellent results. They've had significant savings both in resources and manpower, and of course the cost of the raw material. They're doing real well with it. There's a lot of agencies in the metropolitan area here that have visited their site and are very interested in what they're doing. There's also several examples of agencies using calcium chloride, both dry and wet, and recycling sand, pre-wetting with salt brine, and pre-wetting with magnesium chloride. Communications with the public is the next subheading, with the examples of new electronic media communications, including cable televisions. I know of several local agencies using their local cable systems to broadcast positive informational segments dealing with snow and ice control. That's become a very viable opportunity for us to get a good positive crafted message out to our public, to talk to people about the same things that we talk to them over and over and over again each day on the telephone. Next, appropriate snow plowing techniques is covered. I know in Minnesota our agencies all feel like plowing snow is one of our best efforts, so the reader of the report may feel like it's presumptuous that we need to know more. But I'm sure that most everyone can learn something from this exchange of information. A good example is shown on page 83 of the full report, where Dean Williamson from Albert Lea, Minnesota talks about specialized cul-de-sac equipment. Dean is one of our panelists later on today here, and if you have any questions, you can certainly refer to him at that time. Passive snow control measures is another category, and the highlighted ideas presented include shelter belts, regrading roads, system tracking, and identifying and removing obstacles that catch the snow. There's also an equipment improvement and preventative maintenance section under the operational group, which is the last category. This section highlights innovative sanding applications, backlighted mapping displays. I believe you see a shot of the backlighted display on your monitor at this time. The city of Woodbury came up with this idea. They had it produced locally and they use it. It turned out to work very well. It's similar to the old fiche system. There's a plastic overlay for each of the individual's routes. If one person is called to another person's route or someone is absent or something like that, you can use that mapping system, and it works a lot better than some of the books. I've seen it. It's really a terrific idea. There's also innovations in plow blades and applications, corrosion inhibitors, heated mirrors, among other terrific ideas from several agencies included in that section. And so that's a quick down and dirty summary of the Minnesota legislators' auditor's best practice, that's a mouthful, for snow and ice control report. As you participate today in this teleconference, please understand that every category and example contained within the report may not be included. Just as the original document couldn't contain every example of every agency's innovative ideas or best practices. I know when I first looked at it, I looked and I thought, you know, I know some things that people are doing that are very innovative that I don't see in here, but there just simply was not the time or the resources. It couldn't be an encyclopedia. But again, it's a great effort made in the direction of breaking down some of the barriers which have historically occurred between agencies and levels of agencies. And by its example of providing contact persons and phone numbers, again, I think it will prove and has already proven to be a very valuable resource to all of us, helping us move into the citizen-mandated direction of increased effectiveness, productivity, and resourcefulness. I can give you an example, Tom, of...
Before you give the example, Tom, sure. One thing that occurred to me, you know, when you were talking about the city of Woodbury and their employee training days, I used to work at the city of Woodbury, and they had us engineering types over there during that training day, and they had this little course set out so that we could drive the trucks through the, you know, and back up to the barricade and see how many cones we could knock over and those kinds of things. And I think it was very educational for us. I mean, none of us had ever driven a snowplow before, and they were easy on us. They made us drive a small one, you know, a small pickup truck. But that was kind of an interesting thing and made us appreciate in the engineering department some of the things that the public works people were doing and some of the things that they had to deal with. And you know, another thing that you talked about, this kind of leads into your example here, when this technology transfer, and I can't emphasize this enough, especially, you know, for those of you in other states. I mean, we didn't, you know, we've had technology transfer, and I know that technology transfer has been available in other states for a long time, but before this document came along, you know, we didn't have everything put together in one packet. We didn't have all these phone numbers and all these case studies.
It's kind of an excellent model.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a springboard.
It really is. And you know, another example is our Circuit Rider van program. When we went out and we were talking about snow and ice control with the local governments, we got as much back out of them as we were giving. I mean, there are some fantastic little things that you think, well, why didn't somebody think of that earlier? But, you know, these people had these, like whether they were in Virginia or Owatonna or Morris or Crookston or wherever, they came up with these neat little devices that were back-saving or safety-related or just made their jobs easier. Sure. And, you know, we've started compiling these into a nice little booklet that we hope that we can share with people in the future. So, I mean, it's not only transferred down, like, say, from MnDOT to the counties to the cities. MnDOT is getting a lot out of this as well, and the rest of the state, and just transferring between agencies. So I think, along with this and the Circuit Rider van and some of the other things that we're doing, you know, that's a really important thing, and it really has helped us all do our jobs better. But I think you've got an example that maybe where this report might have helped you out in the past. You
bet. You see it every day as a practitioner in the field. There's a lot of circumstances where we have technology available, or like you said, there's an opportunity to learn from somebody that's really kind of done it before, and everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. At our city, we installed a liquid calcium chloride system about 3 years ago. I guess this will be the third one or the fourth one or whatever. And along the way, we're really just learning to use it well now. And along the way, we've investigated several different things. One of the things we wanted to check out was magnesium chloride. talking to the suppliers and to the vendors and to the people. We tried to get names and phone numbers, contact persons of practitioners in the field that were using the product, and really kind of came up against a wall there. I talked to a fellow in Vail, Colorado, and I talked to a fellow in Kansas City, and I talked to folks here and there, and we didn't really come up with anybody with a comparable climate and set of circumstances to what we're familiar with in our snow and ice control operations. And although mag chloride has the potential to do some different things that we can't do with liquid calcium chloride, until we talk to somebody in the field that's had the experiences and probably the mistakes, we're really reluctant to get into it. And that's where this thing really comes into vogue. I can't say enough good about what you've done, Jody, or what your people have done. Like I said in the beginning, there was a lot of reluctance to trust this kind of a task to people that really weren't in the business, and then to get the result that we got out of it is just remarkable. You folks did a fabulous job of it, just really, really well, really nicely done.
Okay. You know, it kind of goes back to, I remember a previous best practices report, which will go unnamed. But a lot of people had problems with that because that was geared towards, you know, kind of telling people what to do, and it really didn't involve the citizens and the, not the citizens, but the practitioners as much as your report has done. And so I think that's kind of the other end of how a best practices report should not be done. And this is an example of how it should be done. So, you know, I think you're right, Tom. I think that's
really well
that's a good start. Yep. Well, I think that sets the stage for you. We're going to take a short 1-minute break to bring on some new faces and then come right back to discuss policies, planning, performance, and public communication. Now would be a good time to call in your questions. See you back here in 1 minute. Welcome back. I'm going to give you a few minutes to get settled in here. I know we've just had a break and probably some of you are still trying to find your seats, but I'm going to take this opportunity to remind you, and I'm sure you're going to get sick and tired of hearing me say this today, but please call in your questions or fax in your questions. We really want to hear what you've got to say, whether it's you know, whether it's in Whitehorse, the Yukon territories, or Missouri, or Bagley, Minnesota, or Fairbanks, wherever you're calling in from. We certainly would like to hear what you've had to say and have this panel respond to your questions. Okay, during the next 30 minutes, we'll be covering policies, planning, performance, and public communication. Joining us now is Jack Hennon, attorney with the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust. Jack will be sharing some of the things he has learned in dealing with cities on snow and ice control liability issues. Also joining us is Rich Romness. Rich is with RCM Consulting Engineers. Rich has had over 15 years experience with snow and ice control administration, mostly with the city of Fargo, North Dakota. Rich is also one of our T-squared instructors. Jack, Rich, it's all yours.
Thanks. Snow and ice control requires planning. Governmental entities that plan, develop policies, measure their performance, and communicate with the public are less likely to have claims and lawsuits arising out of their snow removal activities and more likely to come out ahead when they do. Recently, I talked to Leo Rudolph about the city of Owatonna's snow removal policy, the development of that policy, and the implementation of that policy. Owatonna is a city of about 20,000 people located 1 hour south of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. Let's see how Leo and his folks do things in Owatonna. First of all, Leo, how did Owatonna go about developing a snow removal or a snow plowing policy?
We initially started by attending a one-day snow conference in St. Cloud, Minnesota, in which the discussion centered around the importance of actually having a snow removal policy. We came back home, and at that time Owatonna didn't have any type of written policy relative to snow removal. We took information that we gained at St. Cloud, brought it back, sat down with our employees and spent a day and a half and talked about, one, the importance of having something written that was still functional, but something that we could give citizens and tell citizens how we intended to remove snow or ice in the city of Owatonna.
Why was it important to sit down with the employees from your city?
I think number one reason is the employees have to buy into any type of written policy. You have to have employee support. If they're the ones that are going to carry out and implement what I develop and a city council endorses, they still are the ones that need to carry that out.
Is this a policy that you developed? Is this something that's been written in stone, or do you look at it and review it and revise it from time to time?
No, we haven't made any major revisions, but we do take suggestions from employees. We've developed a even-odd emergency snow removal parking policy, and that's simply as the result of employees and observations. Plowing around vehicles, needing to come back then and get that windrow away from the vehicle that you plowed around, as opposed to having one side of a street completely clear that first night that you go out, and then being able to do the opposite side the second night, and you're done.
Why don't you show us what your snow and ice removal policy or process looks like in terms of?
Well, our policy consists of probably 6 or 7 typewritten pages. It details what our step-by-step process is in snow removal. It tells people that here are the streets that we have identified that are our #1 priority. We identify then right on down the line to alleys and cul-de-sacs where they fit in that schedule. We've identified when we will normally begin a snow removal operation. For example, most of our operations begin midnight or later.
What sort of weather events have to occur before you're going to initiate snow removal?
We use as a minimum 2-inch snow. Now, that can be sometimes misleading too. We're in kind of a wide open area here in southern Minnesota. You can get 2 inches of snow and have it drift 10 inches in different parts of town, which will still necessitate plows going out in certain areas and opening up streets. So there's nothing that you can write, I think, from a policy that's going to cover everything.
Does your snow removal policy give you the kind of flexibility to take into consideration those kind of differences in conditions?
Most certainly.
How did that affect the policy development, affect decisions concerning routes and use of equipment and how you were going to do your basic job?
Well, one is when we met with our employees, we have roughly 16 full-time people within our street division that would normally be involved in snow and ice removal in Owatonna. Many of these people have been around for 15, 20 years. They have a good sense of how long it takes to drive a certain area of town when you're driving it with a plow and trying to have a good snow removal. We took that expertise, and what we did is we tried to then divide into 4 major plow areas, so that 4 major plow areas with the same amount of equipment would be plowed in the same amount of time.
In addition to those 4 areas, did you have another area where downtown main arterial streets that you'd identified?
Yeah, we do, Jack. We have an area here, which is our central business district, and along with that, 2 major arterials or collectors in Owatonna that are 4-lane streets with wide sidewalks that we need to pick the snow up. Those were commitments that were made by our city council to people.
And this area has been identified as in your snow removal policy, right?
Yes, that area has been identified, and as a result, when you take a look at our other map that shows our 4 plow zones, there's an area here in the center that's white, and that's this motor patrol area where we put our motor graders in to do all the windrowing.
Okay. And so you're placing the snow in windrows, and then you're going back and picking that up, and you're trying to get that done. You start at midnight, by noon the next day.
By noon the next day.
And then after you've identified these 4 areas, how is it that you tell your snowplow operators the routes that they're going to take?
Okay. I don't tell them.
Okay.
What we do is we've used the expertise of our plow operators to identify what are the best patterns, what are the best routes, plowing routes to use, what's the most efficient, what gets us done the quickest. And so what we did is we sat down and we took the pairs of people that work in tandem, and they took their area and they sat down and identified what would be the most efficient way to get this blue area plowed without backtracking a lot.
Leo, you've told us about how you have developed your policy, but what methods do you use to kind of measure your performance, to see how you're doing compared to the policy that you've established for yourself?
Different methods, I really think. We used a scientifically valid survey format about 1.5 years ago, where we evaluated all kinds of different city services, including snow removal. And to our surprise, we got a little bit lower rating than we really anticipated getting from the general public. We take citizen calls. We do have a hotline number at City Hall that people can call in specifically about snow removal and to register complaints. We also have one at our city shop, an answering service so we don't miss any messages. And I think that you can evaluate how you're doing during the course of a snow season simply based on the number of complaints you get.
How did you communicate with the public? Tell them about your policy and what they can expect with respect to snow removal in Owatonna.
We're really fortunate here in Owatonna that our media sources, the radio station, the newspaper, cable TV, offer us numerous opportunities both prior to the snow season and during the snow season to talk to the general public on talk shows.
Did you do a talk show on radio then?
I probably do a talk show on the radio 2 to 3 times during each snow season.
What other methods did you use? Brochures?
We do brochures. This particular one explains our new winter snow emergency rule, where we have even odd parking, where we declare a snow emergency. This gets mailed to every single resident in the city. In the city of Owatonna, we also have what we call our resident guide. People that come into town. We have these at motels. We have these at every major employer. And it just is an extremely good book. And we have snow removal information in this book as well.
In addition to a snow removal policy, the City of Owatonna has a separate heavy snowfall removal plan. This is an emergency plan that addresses who does what when they get 18 inches of snow in 36 hours or 24 or more inches of snow in 48 hours. This plan identifies roads that for public safety purposes need to be open. For example, main arterials and streets serving fire stations and hospitals. The policy also identifies and assigns emergency snow removal tasks to every city employee capable of operating any snow removal equipment, from the dog catcher right down to the assistant finance director. Now, after talking to Leo Rudolph, I interviewed Mark, one of his snowplow operators. And Mark told me about the input that the snowplow drivers had and continue to have on policy development. He told me about how Owatonna's policy helped him devise a plow route to meet those policy objectives, and how the policy really has made it easier for him and other plow operators to do their jobs. What are the basic components for a good snow plowing policy? First of all, it's written. If it's not written down, your employees may be asked about their understanding of an unwritten policy. If one employee's version of your policy doesn't square with some other employee's version, it makes it look like you don't have a policy, or you haven't told all your employees about it. A good policy tells you when to start. It sets forth your plowing, sanding, and removal procedures. It establishes priorities and schedules. It may set parking restrictions. It addresses weather conditions that may cause you to change or modify your normal procedures. It also sets forth your response to complaints. A written policy provides guidance and direction for employees. It is also a measuring stick for performance. It helps you plan, and it creates the discretionary or governmental immunity record. Discretionary immunity exists because you can't do everything at once. There simply isn't enough resources, equipment, time, or money. Following a policy that you developed after weighing political, social, and economic considerations may make your governmental entity immune from lawsuit. Finally, telling the public about your policy helps them make good travel decisions.
Your policy should state what triggers your snow and ice operations. Many cities use an accumulation of 2 inches of snow or more before they begin plowing operations. Other cities simply state that they will begin plowing operations when snow or ice impedes the normal flow of traffic. Whatever you use, you should have a logical decision-making process for deciding when you're going to begin your snow and ice control operations. You may also want to include how you will handle icing conditions on bridge decks, overpasses, and in heavy traffic areas. The policy should give some general guidelines for snow plow procedures. There are several safety issues you should take into consideration, like minimizing interference with normal traffic flow, keeping windrows out of intersections, minimizing the backing of snowplow equipment. Most cities in general say that snow will be plowed from the center line to the right and piled on the boulevard. Exceptions to this standard procedure should be spelled out, because very often you use some different type of snow plow procedure in given areas like one-ways and downtown areas. Plowing on bridge decks and overpasses should not push snow off of the bridge deck onto traffic below. Some cities will spell out when plows will be pulled off of the street due to poor visibility. The policy should state when and where snow will be hauled away from parking areas, cul-de-sacs, or other boulevard areas. It should state the policy for each area. When do you do it? And the priority also. Your snow storage policy, where you dump your snow, should cover minimizing environmental problems and address snow storage locations in relation to streams, rivers, lakes, and wetlands.
Set priorities. Snow emergency routes and major arterials should be done first. Think about access to hospitals and fire stations. Provide a normal operating schedule, and by that I mean how long should it take you to do the job under normal operating conditions. A snow removal policy may also outline parking restrictions and tagging and towing procedures.
Your use of salt and sand and other chemicals should be spelled out in your policy. You should state whether your policy is anti-icing, preventing slippery conditions from occurring, or de-icing, which is responding to slippery conditions that have already formed. You should state the type of chemicals and aggregates that you will use and the environmental and budget concerns you've taken into consideration in the use of these chemicals.
Weather conditions may force you to temporarily suspend or alter your snow removal activities. Spell out those circumstances. Address safety concerns such as driver fatigue, and then provide the public with information they need to know to prevent accidents.
Your policy should state how will you respond to citizens' requests for service and property damage. These requests should always be directed to the same department and, if possible, the same person. Your response to complaints, requests for service should be consistent. Your response should also solve the problem without necessarily admitting fault or liability. A procedure for handling property damage, especially mailboxes, sod, trees, fences, should be established. You may find it beneficial to have a policy that provides for the restoration of mail delivery quickly and efficiently when mailboxes have been knocked over due to plowing operations. Many homeowners simply do not have the tools or capabilities to provide temporary mailboxes, and this probably is one of the largest sources of complaints from the public. After your policy has been adopted, you need to begin planning your snow removal operations. Your plan should include at least all of the following: a reference to your policy, personnel who will be involved in snow removal, equipment and equipment maintenance, your budget, routing and scheduling, and weather forecasting. Your policy provides you an outline for your plan that will meet the established policy requirements. You need to select personnel, equipment, materials, and then budget to provide these resources. In planning for personnel, it's important to have operators available to cover all your shifts and emergencies. Your daily planning involves the number of shifts you use each day and the hours that you will have operators on the street. Also spell out how weekend, holiday, and standby time are handled so that people will be available for snow removal during these times. Most cities consider snow removal an emergency situation. Therefore, you want to look at interdepartmental, temporary, or part-time personnel resources. Short-term personnel needs and very specific services, such as snow hauling, may be contracted to private agencies. Another very important part of personnel planning is safety. You need to schedule breaks and long shifts and consider the length of each shift. Operator fatigue can be both hazardous to the operator and to the traveling public. When planning for equipment purchases, you should consider whether equipment can be used for multiple tasks and during several seasons. You need to balance the amount of equipment available with the number of operators you have for each operation. You need to consider equipment size, attachments that are available for each type of equipment to expand their use, ease of operation, and reliability. You need to plan for the training of personnel to use this equipment. Personnel will need to be trained for several types of equipment to produce flexibility you need. Your training and use of equipment and materials should be consistent with your policy and with public safety concerns.
When budgeting, think farther into the future than this season or next season. You should be considering where development and traffic are likely to be 5 years from now. You need to look at purchasing and alternatives to purchasing, like leasing, contracting for services, and cooperative ventures. A policy adopted or endorsed by the City Council or the County Board provides you with basically the framework for budgeting. What they are saying is this is what we want you to do, and what you're saying is this is what it's going to cost to do it.
Planning routes and schedules will give maximum results at a minimum cost. Designating routes will spread out the workload amongst available equipment and manpower. It will also reduce travel time, increase productivity, and put the best equipment for existing conditions on each route. For example, you can route loaders into cul-de-sacs and other dead-end streets. Large trucks with wings can be routed onto multi-lane roadways, and motor graders can be used for reduced speeds where sidewalks are directly adjacent to the roadway. Routing takes into account both personnel and equipment availability for your snow removal operation. Scheduling involves the mobilization of resources, shift work, and emergencies. The mobilization plan spells out when and how personnel are contacted, reporting procedures, and equipment to be used. It may spell out the use of personnel phone numbers, pagers, and possibly even cellular phones. For any mobilization effort to be effective, operators must keep supervisors aware of where they can be reached. Organizing into teams can make mobilization procedures much easier, as team leaders can notify members of their team versus one person contacting everyone. Shift work may be necessary if snow plowing takes more than one 8-hour shift. A 24-hour operation would involve 2 or 3 crews with 8 or 12-hour shifts. Along with scheduling operators, you must also have personnel available for equipment repair and upkeep.
Weather information, both long and short range, is critical in planning and scheduling. There are a number of sources for that information. What you need is timely information that identifies conditions in your area that you are interested in. You can use that information to modify procedures to meet anticipated conditions, to tell the public what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. For example, if the forecast is for 12 inches of snow, you can declare a snow emergency before all the snow hits the ground.
Measuring performance of your snow removal program is extremely important for several reasons. One is you want to make sure that you're meeting your policy requirements. And 2, you want to determine if you're meeting citizen expectations. Examples of some of the records that will indicate your performance as it relates to policy would be recording the date and time of snowfall, weather conditions at the start, during, and at completion of your operation, and your mobilization time from call out to start of operations. Also record your personnel that were available, equipment that was available, and the time that you complete each route. To track citizen expectations, you must have a good complaint response program. You may find it valuable to call this system a service request, action request, or public comment rather than complaint. This removes the negative connotation that goes with complaints. First, you should record all requests for service or complaints on a form and issue a work order for servicing each request. You then record your response to each request along with the date, time, and the action you took. If you take no action, you should record a reason for not taking that action. Then a follow-up call to the person who complained should be made on each work order. This type of system will help you develop a proactive versus reactive evaluation of your performance, using the records of complaints as a measuring tool of your response to changing public needs. You can also use your record keeping to improve performance or modify snow and ice control policy and procedures.
Why should you maintain records? Records testify for you and your employees. They help you prove what you did and why you did it and when you did it. Records are unbiased and persuasive because they were prepared before anyone knew there was an accident. Records also help you modify policies and procedures. So now that you've got a policy, what do you do with it? You communicate that policy with the public. You do that in the newspaper, with brochures, with newsletters, over the radio, whatever works in your community. Get public input. Tell people about your policy and what they can expect.
A service request or complaint system can be a valuable form of public communication. A 24-hour hotline can be used for citizens to call in their requests for service. An operator answering the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is best. However, budget restrictions may force you to use answering machines or possibly an answering service. It's very important that all service requests or complaints are followed up and a response is made to the caller. Whenever possible, you should provide a phone number where people can get additional information concerning current road conditions, status of your snow removal efforts, and emergency declarations that may be in effect, such as parking restrictions in areas of snow removal.
When communicating with the public, don't limit yourself to one medium. Not everybody's going to subscribe to your newspaper. Not everybody is going to be listening to radio. The more mediums that you use, the more likely you are to be able to reach everyone. And don't think of public communication as something that's just limited to written format. You can do talk radio shows. You can provide information to schools on safety and how you're going to deal with those issues. And that's important. A lot of the policies that you develop require input from the public, but also involve public safety for smaller children. The better the public understands what you do and why, the easier it is for them to make good travel decisions, to move their cars, and to cooperate with you so that you can do your job. All of this helps decrease complaints, accidents, and lawsuits. Now, in addition to the Snow and Ice Control Best Practices Review booklet or executive summary that you received, you can also obtain a packet that includes a detailed 13-page outline of the presentation that you just heard. It will include a model snow plowing policy, copies of Owatonna's snow removal and heavy snow emergency policies with attached maps and samples of flyers. It's got brochures and newspaper articles and flyers that are used to communicate with the public. This information is free. All you need to do is call 1-800-925-1122. That number is 1-800-925-1122 and ask for the Snow and Ice Control Packet. If you call us, we'll be more than happy to send one out to you free of charge.
Well, thanks, Jack, Rich. You know, I don't know about you, but while Jack was talking, especially when he talked about the assistant finance administrator doing some snowplow activities, I had this picture in my mind, but we'll get on with this. All right, both Jack and Rich will be back later to answer your questions after this next segment. Once again, you can call or fax in your questions at any time, and we will try to answer them during the panel discussion. During the next 20 minutes, we'll get into cooperative services and facilities. To do this, we have Jan Eckern, Partnership Coordinator with MnDOT. Jan has been working on a really fascinating project, which she is now going to tell us all about. Jan?
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to be sharing several examples of snow and ice control partnerships that the Minnesota Department of Transportation is involved in. But of course, MnDOT did not invent partnerships, and they're certainly not new. Local governments have been working together for years. In fact, many of the partnerships that are found in the Best Practices Report are among townships, cities, and counties. And I'd like to bring your attention to a couple of them. The first partnership on page 38 of the Best Practices Report is the Township Maintenance Association. It includes the townships of Hawk Creek, Erickson, Wang, Sacred Heart, and Crooks. The association provides snow and ice control services as well as year-round maintenance for all township roads. This maintenance association has been in existence since 1945. It establishes rates for labor, equipment, and services, and then charges each member when the services are provided. The townships retain a higher level of control than would be possible with a private contractor, and they're able to purchase equipment that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. The second example, on page 40 of the full report, is a shared storage facility that Douglas County provides for 8 townships and the city of Alexandria. This is the example that Tom Struve mentioned earlier. There are no formal written arrangements, but the county has successfully been providing this service for 12 years. Buying materials such as sand and salt or other chemicals and storing them in a shared facility saves each of the jurisdictions money and allows them to provide a higher level of service. If you're interested in finding out more about these or other local government cooperative arrangements, please feel free to contact the names that are listed in your report. Now I'd like to highlight a few partnerships that Minnesota cities and counties have developed with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Probably the most common arrangement in Minnesota is the shared salt shed. The primary advantage is that one site is environmentally less risky than 2. This site in Sherburne County at the city of Elk River is a good example. In 1992, the county simply shared the state's bins, and employees from both jurisdictions mixed material jointly. The following year, Sherburne County built 2 bins onto the original 2, right on state property. The county provided the labor and material, and MnDOT supervised the construction. There's always a loader at the site, either the counties or the states, and it's used by both jurisdictions. When not in use, the county's loader is stored in the state's warm storage building. No money changes hands in this partnership. Both parties keep track of usage and replace in kind. Sherburne County has another arrangement with the state at the city of Becker. MnDOT was originally planning to destroy an old salt shed, but with some improvements, the building would still be serviceable. So the state gave the building to Sherburne County and moved it onto county property at the city of Becker, which is convenient to both jurisdictions. The state moved the building, and the county paved the new site and fixed up the structure. This map shows the benefits of the new location. Becker was the turnaround point for 3 MnDOT routes, but frequently operators couldn't make it back on one load, especially on Route 3 through the city of Big Lake. Now state operators can reload at Sherburne County's Becker site and make the return trip without running out of material. The city of Becker also uses this site, making it a 3-way partnership. The loader at Becker belongs to Sherburne County, but all 3 jurisdictions use it. Again, no money changes hands in this arrangement. In this third example, the city of Princeton built a 120-ton bin onto existing salt sheds located on state property. The extra capacity allows both jurisdictions to share material at this site. At the beginning of the season, the city of Princeton buys about 25 tons of salt and has it delivered to MnDOT's truck station at Elk River, which I mentioned earlier. MnDOT mixes the sand and salt at Elk River and then hauls it to Princeton. The city of Princeton takes from the joint supply and keeps a record so everyone is comfortable that the arrangement remains balanced. This partnership is a benefit to MnDOT because the state used to have to send a truck specifically to Princeton to clear an overpass, which is frequently used by people in wheelchairs. Now the city clears that overpass, including the sidewalks. The city can get to the overpass much more quickly than the state could, so everyone benefits. The city also sweeps state bridges and curbs every spring. Dollar-wise, this partnership is very even. No money changes hands. The second partnership I'd like to highlight today is a building lease exchange between the city of La Crescent and MnDOT. Basically, each jurisdiction has agreed to provide space for the other, at no cost, in their respective buildings. An important component of this arrangement is the fact that the city and state properties are side by side. Here's how it works. The state had an old vehicle storage building in the city of La Crescent that was in very bad shape, and the state would probably never have replaced it because it was only 6 miles from another MnDOT site. However, the location was very important because it served a high-volume scenic road along the Mississippi River, and it was a loading point for 4 MnDOT routes. Even if MnDOT had no need to store vehicles at La Crescent, the state would still have a need to store sand and salt there. Meanwhile, the city of La Crescent, whose property abuts MnDOT's, needed a salt shed. So the two jurisdictions agreed to provide space for each other. The city remodeled their equipment storage building to accommodate MnDOT vehicles. They added a new overhead door, additional lights, a separate heating system, better drainage, a new bathroom, and a partition. The building now houses a couple of MnDOT Class 33 trucks, a loader, a pickup, and some miscellaneous equipment. Right next door, MnDOT erected on its property a new salt shed with storage area, making sure the capacity would serve both the city and the state. A partition divides the shed, with the city using about 40% of the capacity. This shows what each jurisdiction provided. Originally, the city's investment was valued at $10,000 more than the state's. So, to help balance the arrangement, the state agreed to let the city use 1.3 acres of adjacent state property for 25 years. That allowed the partnership to proceed with no exchange of money. Currently, the city's leased land is being used by the county as a recycling center. They've erected a temporary building to serve as a drop-off site for cardboard, paper, aluminum, and plastic. In the future, the city of La Crescent may decide to use the land to expand their sewer treatment plant. The city and state are each responsible for maintaining their respective buildings. There are 7 employees at the site, 3 state and 4 city. The employees occasionally cross paths, but they are essentially separate. The supervisors made sure that local residents were well informed of plans ahead of time, assuring them that the final result would be much more attractive and cost-efficient. The two agencies estimate that initially they saved about $320,000 with this arrangement. And the cost-benefit analysis shows the annual value received for each party is very close, $3,500 for the city and $3,900 for the state. Now I'd like to describe a vehicle sharing arrangement. Although this partnership is between MnDOT and a private contractor, it could be replicated at any other level of government. This is an international truck that's owned by a private contractor, McLaughlin and Schultz, and is leased to the Minnesota Department of Transportation during the winter only. When the contractor purchased the vehicle, he worked with the state and accommodated MnDOT snowplowing specs. The state uses the truck November through April for plowing snow and hauling winter sand, and the contractor uses it in the summer to haul bituminous and do seal coating. MnDOT insures and licenses the truck just like any other leased vehicle. And like other state-owned snowplow trucks, MnDOT workers have equipped it with a 2-way radio, a light package, hydraulics, and a push plate for the plow hookup. When the state uses the truck, operators attach a magnetic logo plate over the contractor's name. The state rents the truck for about $19.50 an hour and guarantees the contractor 400 hours a year. By way of comparison, MnDOT's cost for operating a state-owned Class 33 truck is $29.68 an hour. These are the benefits to the state. It saves the initial capital investment of $90,000 for a new truck. Major breakdowns are covered under warranty. The contractor replaces tires, and this truck will be replaced every 5 to 7 years. By contrast, state-owned trucks are replaced about every 12 to 14 years. So this arrangement will result in a newer fleet, which also means better parts availability. And finally, the state expects operating costs to be lower, or at the very least, breaking even. The contractor benefits too. The unit works year-round, so the contractor doesn't have idle capital. And the contractor receives better return for his investment. He's guaranteed 400 hours at $19.50 an hour. And MnDOT takes care of any minor repairs. In the big scheme of things, taxpayers are buying equipment for both private contractors and government. So, if a vehicle can be shared and used year-round, it should result in fewer trucks purchased and money saved. The final partnership I'd like to share with you is a three-way arrangement where the city, county, and state together built a new maintenance facility in Hutchinson, Minnesota. The main building was completed in the fall of 1995, and the salt sheds will be completed next spring.
This winter in southwestern Minnesota, a new support facility for snow and ice removal services will be in use for the first time. More than a new facility, the Hutchinson Area Transportation Services Building may represent a new pattern of collaboration and cooperation among governmental agencies. The new $3 million facility is a cooperative project of the Minnesota Department of Transportation, McLeod County, and the City of Hutchinson. It is the culmination of nearly 5 years of study, planning, and negotiation growing out of a fortunate coincidence of timing and need. About 5 years ago, MnDOT was faced with the need for replacing the facilities of its truck station in southwestern Minnesota's McLeod County. Around the same time, both McLeod County and the City of Hutchinson were facing the same prospect, replacing and upgrading their own sanding and ice removal facilities.
Originally, the county and state started talking about maybe just sharing a site, and I guess we came up with the idea of, well, what would happen if we shared a building? And it started out as being maybe 3 buildings on one site, or 3 wings with one office area, and we actually developed it into something I think much better.
All 3 agencies, being MnDOT and the County of McLeod and the City of Hutchinson, all were faced with obsolete street and highway garages that needed to be replaced, and it was fortunate that there was enough communication between the agencies that we were aware of each other's needs.
Consequently, they got together and decided to do it as a joint facility to try to save some taxpayer dollars.
The design of the new building and the plan for its operation carefully balances the needs of each agency for space of its own with the money-saving benefits of sharing other facilities. So, while each agency has its own area for indoor storage and maintenance of trucks and plows, other facilities are designed to be shared. For instance, all 3 agencies will use the same automated washing bay. When the system can complete the job in 90 seconds, it can accommodate a lot of machines, and there's no need for each agency to have its own dedicated system.
We will be sharing a fueling system, we'll be sharing sand and salt storage facilities and wash bays, and all those costs will be inventoried internally and then charged out to the different agencies.
This collaboration represents significant savings for all 3 agencies and the taxpayers in both the initial construction of the facility and in annual operational costs.
We did a feasibility report before we started, and that noted that we would save about 15 to 20% in total floor space by combining, because there are some things like kitchen areas and bathrooms where there's a shared common savings and open areas. And so that we figured saved anywhere from $375,000 to $500,000 up front. We look at if we share any equipment at all. We had looked at an average piece of equipment like a front-end loader. If we share just one front-end loader that we don't have to all purchase, that would save about $9,000 a year. We looked at energy savings are probably in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000 a year.
Taxpayer dollars savings will result in several different areas: sand and salt loading facilities, equipment sharing. Hopefully in time, over a period of years, we might even share people and roads.
We can save money by buying our materials in larger quantities. We can save money by sharing equipment. You need one loader instead of 3 loaders.
initially one of the biggest selling points that we've had is the liability and the environmental impact of this facility on one 22-acre site, as opposed to maybe being in the same area on 3 separate 5-acre sites, each having their own stormwater runoff ponds and exposures to groundwater with our fueling and oiling. This concentration in one location and probably access to better expertise on how to deal with this when we have more employees and more involvement on one site than 3 scattered sites. I think that savings that we have just from that alone, which is probably difficult to measure when you're talking about how much less liability is there, but that to me is one of the strongest selling points of what we're doing here.
When agencies from 3 levels of government propose this kind of collaboration, issues of jurisdiction, ownership, and control need to be addressed. The solution for HATS was to devise a special management unit that would function somewhat separately from any of the 3 agencies it represents.
Essentially, the committee that controlled construction of this facility was called the Joint Powers Board. In fact, the Joint Powers Board owns this facility. It's a 3-partner ownership. In fact, the city owns 50% of it, and the state and county each own 25% of the facility.
By a joint powers agreement, the Joint Powers Board will run the facility. We'll set up budgets. We will make decisions on shared equipment and possibly shared employees, perhaps to maintain the building and grounds initially, and maybe clerical help. And any purchase and capital outlay like underground fuel tanks and things like that, make those types of decisions, and also just see to the needs of the people who are working here providing the maintenance.
The Hutchinson Area Transportation Services facility is a reality today thanks to skillful planning and the care taken to involve people at all decision-making levels, from state, county, and city officials to the crew people who operate the equipment.
It was kind of fun because you're doing so many things together, and the planning and all that part, when you do it jointly, you've got a lot of different ideas coming in, and the employees are also involved in the meeting and deciding what kind of stuff should be in equipment and the size, and it got a kind of, everybody had an input into it.
Again, I think it was just a combination of the right timing and the right people being involved.
I learned that there's a lot of cooperation among agencies. There's a lot of nice people out there to work with, and they work together very well.
I think it's the way of the future. I think that with the less money, if you don't want to cut services, if you want to have any hope of maintaining the level of services, you're going to have to find new ways of doing business.
When it comes to partnerships, I'm sure these examples are only the tip of the iceberg. If any of you are involved in any unique or cost-effective cooperative arrangements, I invite you to share them with us by calling the number for this broadcast. And if you want more information about any of the examples that I've highlighted here today, I'll be glad to provide you with contact names and numbers of key participants.
Well, thanks, Jan. You know, it's an overused phrase, but we hear a lot about doing more with less, and I think this is one of the ways that we can do it with cooperative partnerships like this, like we've just seen here with the City of Hutchinson, and save the taxpayers thousands of dollars, which is really what they're asking us to do, and provide the same level of service. So thanks again for sharing those with us. Right now we've got a few questions, and we're going to begin our first panel discussion. But before we do, let me reintroduce our panel members. They are Jack Hennon, Tom Struve, Jan Eckern, which you just saw, and Rich Romness. Okay, I'm going to throw out this first question for for Tom. Tom, how does mandatory drug, this is from Craig in Crookston. How does mandatory drug and alcohol testing affect the use of random pool employees for snow removal and ice control?
Well, Jack and I were kind of discussing that. Conceptually, I think most of our agencies have the maybe unspoken policy in place that if it becomes emergency status snow and ice control, we'll gather in whoever we need to gather in to man the equipment if it goes into 24-hour operations and that sort of thing. But the new drug screening enforcement policies, I guess they're due to begin first of the year.
Yes.
The random screening is going to play a little bit into this, and there is really not a firm positive answer to that question. Anybody who as a prerequisite of their employment, as I understand it, who is required to operate a commercial license. I believe that's 26,000 pounds and above. There are some other sort of skirted requirements to that. But basically, that's kind of what it comes down to, is going to be required to be in that random pool for drug and alcohol screening. Is that not the case?
Even if it's not true, I mean, for public safety purposes, you can spell out for these individuals in their job description that this is part of their duties. In emergency situations, they're going to be required to operate the snow removal equipment, and you can make them a part of that mandatory drug testing policy for your city. But you need to spell that out in the personnel policy, and you need to spell that out in the job description. So that has to be a part of that person's job description, and that's probably the easiest way to handle that.
Sure, it might be a tad tough after the fact, you know. These policies and job descriptions are already in place. They may have to be modified.
You may have to modify it for that class of employee to include them.
For the individual that asked that question, I can assure you that everybody is struggling with the same circumstances. How are we going to incorporate this new set of testing procedures into the pool? You know, where do we stop? The director, the city administrator, the county engineers, you know, where is the cutoff for who needs to be screened and who isn't? But the way I understand it, it still comes back down to the fact that if you're in a commercial CDL driving circumstance, you're going to be thrown into the pool where you're subject to the random testing. I hope that answers the question.
All right. Okay, this next question is addressed to Jan Eckern. It's from NOLA at the Earl Brown Center in St. Paul. And he says, what can we do to inform the public in our own areas of the cooperation between government agencies so they see the benefit of better service? Also, that we are living within our own budget. So Jan, I'll pass that on to you.
Thank you. Well, I think the media certainly is a good way to get your message out, and you can do that with call-in radio shows, newspapers, cable in a lot of communities. That's a good way to get a message out. You can develop a speakers bureau with your own workers and going out to community civic groups, for example, schools or other organizations that are looking for people to come and talk to them about their local issues. You can talk to your local institutions like vocational schools or community colleges, churches, those kinds of groups. Your major employers may have opportunities for speakers to come out and inform their employees about things that are going on in their local community and government. Of course, you can form a partnership with your local community. Many cities have a newsletter that they send out regarding recycling requirements, and that's a good vehicle to get messages about how all different jurisdictions are working together.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to add, any of your own personal experiences with what works and what doesn't in that communication area?
I know one of the presentations that I give occasionally, Jan, we talk about where if it's real important, critically important in the government sector that we take advantage of any of those opportunities to fashion a positive, well-crafted message. If you have the opportunity to have input in your city newsletter, take some time and be creative and resourceful and spend some creative energy on it. Don't just throw in, well, okay, this is acceptable. But we have sort of, I think, an obligation among ourselves to be proactive and be real positive about our operations and about our people. And I would really strongly encourage everybody to take those opportunities and really spend some time on it. And we can make those opportunities in some cases too.
Tom, this is also truth and taxation season for most governmental entities, and that means counties, townships, school districts, and cities. And this is an opportunity where you're required to hold public hearings telling the city, telling your residents how you're spending their money. And this is an excellent opportunity for you to share that type of cooperative ventures because they're going to be asking those questions anyway. So you've got one built-in opportunity every year.
There are two really good ideas that work particularly well with snow and ice control, and that is to put a snowplow truck in a shopping mall. It's local, it will draw lots of attention. You can put a couple of employees there and station to converse with the public as they come by and ask questions about it. It's a good opportunity to do that, and many times malls are looking for opportunities. A second good idea is to invite a local reporter, a print person, if that's the only media you have in your community, to ride in the passenger seat of a snowplow truck. They can get some good material, some good footage, good photo opportunities, and get that message across to the local community.
A couple of other things that come to mind too. A lot of the local agencies in the metropolitan area have been moving in the direction of public works open houses or community services open houses, and with raving reviews, with excellent success. That's a terrific opportunity. When we first did it in our agency, there was a lot of reluctance and a lot of anxiety, and boy, this could happen and this could happen, and it turns out to be the most positive thing, both inside and outside, when you bring folks in and encourage them to view your operations, and then you go to a little bit of trouble to disseminate the information, the same stuff that we talk to folks about over and over on the telephone. You end up with advocates when they leave for public works and for your operations. It's been used very successfully around the metropolitan area here. And another thing that I would really encourage folks to look into, there are a lot of people, this networking thing again, there are a lot of people that have experience with this that are more than willing to share it with others. So that's another good resource for it.
Rich, I think you've got a couple things to add.
Yeah, one of the things in conveying information to the public, it's very important that you convey facts, that you can say, this is going to save us time. I just know it will. Well, how much time? And your record keeping is extremely important. If you can come in and say, this will save us 10 minutes off of every route we're doing if we have this piece of equipment, or if we're going to save $1,462 per route if we have this piece of equipment, or if we do have this procedure. You know, you're conveying a message to people, telling them exactly what you're going to, rather than say, oh, we could save money if we did this. And the first question you're going to get is, well, how much would we save? Is it worth the expense?
Yeah, I agree with you, Richard. The time has come always in history of public works, as I understand it, it's always been, we kind of practice the art of silent service. And there's really nothing wrong with marketing for ourselves. We need to be out there and be in the public scene and telling folks that we do an excellent job. I think it helps them understand that they're getting value for their tax dollars. It helps our people inside our organizations feel better. You know, it just kind of snowballs into better productivity, better customer service responsiveness, and it's just kind of warm fuzzies all around. But it's a definite positive aspect.
Yeah, one thing that kind of came to my mind, especially as we were watching the video that Jan just showed us, is there's another way to let the public know what kind of a job we are doing in the government sector. And I think that Hutchinson tape is does about as good a job as anything does in letting people know that we really are trying to spend their tax money, correctly and efficiently. And I think that does a good job. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember a meeting that we were at together, Jan, where you said at one point MnDOT, one of your tasks assigned you was to investigate how many categories of circumstances where there was actual partnering occurring out in the state of Minnesota. And I think you said that you discovered, and it wasn't 185 individual cases, it was like 185 categories of circumstances?
That's true. We identified 185 partnerships, but many of those were generic partnerships, for example, sharing a sand and salt shed. And of course, there are probably dozens of examples that fit under that particular description. So a lot of it's going on. Some of it is informal, and some of it is formal, but at many different levels and many different occasions.
Yeah, and you said that there was some anxiety about sharing the information, because sometimes, and I'm sure we can all appreciate that in the public sector, sometimes things can be done on a handshake where if it gets into a technical procedural circumstance, then everybody wants to know who's going to be responsible and this and that and the other thing. But again, like Tom said, it's the video segment that you had is really indicating that people are really becoming more and more aware that this is acceptable, and it's going to be the thing of the future. The idea that each public agency should have $1 trillion invested in specific equipment, for instance, that could be shared by different agencies, where those possibilities exist, I'm sure we're going to see the public sector services taking advantage of that in the future.
Okay, well, thanks. I do want to take this opportunity to remind you, keep calling in your questions or faxing in your questions. We've not only got this panel discussion that we're right in the middle of right now, but we're going to have one on operations later on this afternoon. So if we don't get to some of the questions Now we will be able to get to those questions during the operations section. And then, of course, those questions that we don't get to, we're going to put together in a packet, and we will distribute those to the T-squared centers in all of the states and make sure that they get distributed to each of you. I do have another question that's related to clearing in commercial areas and downtown business districts. But before I do, this is kind of a Star Wars kind of thing, and it relates to the last question in terms of the communication. A lot of times what people want to know is, when is my street going to get plowed? Okay, and with cable TV and now with this GPS technology, global positioning systems, and you can walk into a sporting goods store and buy a fairly inexpensive global positioning system, for fish, locations out on lakes and things like that, and that would be accurate enough. I mean, I could foresee a day coming, and this is really not that far in the future, where an inexpensive GPS system would be in each of the trucks that would be tied into a map that's on cable TV. You want to know where, when your street's going to get plowed? Well, here's the sequence, and this is where the plow is now. A little flashing dot on the screen, showing where the plow is. So I think that that's, that's another way that we can help communicate with it.
Definitely there.
Let's get to our next question. Okay, this is from Ron in Crookston. How do most cities treat snow removal in the Central Business District relevant to accumulation and piled snow on and from private and commercial parking lots? He's asking a lot about how is it hauled, do they send invoices to people and that sort of thing. I'm going to throw this one up in the air. Who wants to tackle this one?
Ron and Crookston, that's a tough one to address. But again, it goes back to the beauty of this snow and ice control report. This technology, this networking, this technology exchange is the basis for developing contact persons of other municipal organizations, folks who have answers to those kind of questions. I think that's really important. I can speak for my particular agency. We don't haul any snow. The city of Eagan is a third-ring suburb of the Twin Cities metropolitan area, and we're a young enough community where there really is no central downtown district. At some point in the future, there may be a need to dispose of some snow, but I don't know, Rich, you had some...
Well, I think one of the ways to start your downtown program would be to sit down with the business people and the city and develop a policy. What is acceptable? What will we do? What will the business district do? And how is it going to be paid for? It can be a TIF district of sorts, where the business people
Now what is a TIF district?
It's a tax increment financing district, and you can collect funds for specific items. But it can be anything. I mean, you just got to think of ways to do that, and you do that in a group session with the downtown business people, the city, and the snow removal people, and you develop a policy. This will work. The business people are willing to pay for it. It's not general city maybe paid for, but that's where you begin it. And from there you develop the policy, and then you develop a plan to take care of that.
I will tell you that in my travels around the state, Tom, that cities approach this in 100 different ways. They have different approaches. But one of the most important things to do from a city standpoint is to look at it from a public safety liability standpoint. And you are going to have higher pedestrian traffic counts in the Central Business District. For political purposes, you may want to encourage people to patronize your downtown businesses. And the weighing these considerations in the development of a policy creates what's called a discretionary or governmental immunity record. And what you've done is you said, we're going to treat this area differently because, and there may be some resistance to people in residential areas, but you have to explain it's not based on us being preferential towards business people versus residential people. It's based on the traffic that we have, the number of pedestrians that we have, the concerns that we have for public safety in this particular area. And you can always do some cooperative ventures. I've seen some cities that have literally come up with a cooperative venture that says we will provide the windrow machine, but the downtown association, you hire the trucks. And they have farmers with grain trucks that come in and take that away. And it's a cooperative venture, not between governmental entities, but between a Chamber of Commerce group and a city.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a great example. And I think what you brought up earlier, Rich, was, you know, and it really gets into the communication thing as well, is meeting with the downtown people, letting them know this service isn't exactly free. You know, I mean, we'll plow the streets, but there are some additional things that we have to do. How do you want us to handle this? And I forget where I read it. I know it was in the best practices report, but one of the cities, I'm not sure if it was Owatonna or not, they actually have a snow and ice control meeting each year with the private citizens, and especially with the commercial people, the downtown business people, to let them know what their policies are. They hold it in September, and to get input and to see if there's other things. How did it work last year? Should we change it this year? You know, that sort of thing. So I think that you know, what you brought up is an excellent point. You know, that you really, it's part of the public communication thing, and we're in this together, the partnership that you talked about with the farmers. You know, let's take care of this. I do want to make sure that we answer all parts of Ron's question here. He has a couple of other parts here. Does the city require a private plower to obtain a permit or license in the downtown area?
I think some cities do ask that a contractor who is going to come in the city and do snow removal be licensed. It may not cost anything, but they have a record of who's doing it. They want to know that at times. Many cities do not have that. They just hire someone, and whoever the business people hire has to take care of it. It makes it difficult for communication if you don't really know who's doing it.
Yeah.
And so I think the licensing and knowing what's happening in your downtown area, especially as it affects your public crews, et cetera, is very important.
And training them as to how you want them to remove snow, and hours of operation and that sort of thing.
You can develop your fall training program to include contractors.
Okay. Another part of Ron's question here is, does the city require commercial areas to have private haulers remove snow? I think you kind of alluded to that a little bit, but anybody want to tackle that one?
Well, I think in general, most private parking lots are done by private contractors.
Okay.
I think that, especially for larger cities that have a lot of parking lots and parking ramps that are not municipal, they are private. Most of them are contracted out to private.
I think the question, though, is more in terms of hauling and removing the snow once that. Yeah, do they have to take the snow off of their site and haul it someplace else?
Right.
Tom, one of the biggest concerns with that, quite frankly, is that when that snow melts, it melts across your sidewalk, your boulevard, and your street, and that creates a public safety concern that you didn't create. It was created by someone else.
Or into your pond.
Or into your pond or whatever. So you do want to address that from a public safety standpoint, because if that person slips and falls on your sidewalk, and they may say, well, yes, that was a condition that was created either by you in the plowing of that parking lot, or that you allowed to occur and you didn't have a policy to tell them to address that. And that is a concern. I'm sorry, Ron, I think I interrupted you there.
No, that's fine. No.
Okay. The last question that we have, and I'm not sure, this really kind of applies more to the operations end of it, and we may be able to answer more of that during the operations panel. But this is from John in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I didn't realize we had a site in Kalamazoo, Michigan, so welcome, John. Is recycling, street sweeping, and winter sand really cost effective? And Tom, you mentioned that you might have some response to that.
Yeah. He goes through, he's got quite a few real good questions here. I can tell you, John, that there's been a lot of interest in this at the local level in the metropolitan area here. Bloomington, I think you saw the shot of that screener shredder was purchased, the bulk of it, the financing came from a grant, and this is really treading on thin water because I don't want to throw out any data and find out that I was wrong. But I know that they did receive some sort of a grant. The city has a fair portion of investment in it also. One of the ways that they justify its existence, or they feel that it's very, very effective, is it not only is used for recycling sweepings, but they use it to pulverize organic materials for their park system. They use it to screen water break things. They use it just about year round, is my understanding. They've been doing it 3 years now. There are other agencies in the Twin Cities area here. I think Little Canada, Woodbury. There's 3 or 4 other agencies that have gotten into this. The discussion has centered around, number one, like you said, is it cost effective? It has a lot to do with whether your virgin material is close if it can be hauled, whether you haul it yourself. I don't know. I've seen Bloomington's figures. I don't know. I couldn't rattle them off right now. They believe that they're pretty close to a wash. They actually believe that they're saving some money if you throw in the fact that you have to, you'd have to have the material delivered someplace, and then you'd have to landfill the sweeping somewhere else. A lot of metropolitan areas, it's not quite so serious in the rural areas, but a lot of the metropolitan areas have limited availability of public property. And a lot of the cases are a situation where it's a NIMBA thing. Nobody wants it in their backyard. You start running a little kind of a landfill in my backyard. I don't want it here. And then, of course, there's the question of hazardous waste. And you had part of that on here, and I just have a moment to address that. We at our agency and several other agencies I know of have done a lot of research, and just in generally, I can tell you that it's not gotten near the heavy metals and the high pollutants in it that people had thought in the past. That doesn't mean you shouldn't check on that, but that's, I guess, all the time we have to talk about.
Well, Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know you could probably go on forever on something like that. Well, I'll tell you, John, let's see if we can get back to your question a little bit later. Maybe we'll talk about it in the afternoon session in the operations. Now, that's all the time we have for questions. During the next month, we'll tabulate those questions that were not answered, get them answered, and distribute them to all attendees. Thanks to our panel members for their responses, and thanks to all of you for all the good questions. Remember, there's one more panel discussion to come, so keep firing those questions at us. We're going to take a short lunch break right now. We'll be back in 15 minutes. See you then.